I am your host, Robert Rowe, and you are listening to Away Radio.
The podcast they don't want you to hear.
Today is May 7th, 2013. Welcome to the show, everyone. Today I'm going to discuss a few topics, and this show is going to be completely my take and my opinion on these topics. Now, the first thing I want to talk about today is the call to march on Washington D.C. with armed weapons on Independence Day later this year. Now, before I get to that topic, I want to address all of my American listeners, specifically the liberals and neocons. The 4th of July is a date, and that's all it is. Everywhere around the world, the 4th of July is the 4th of July. Only here in the United States does it have special significance. And it's time that we remember what that day is called here in the United States. It is called Independence Day. It is not the 4th of July holiday. The term 4th of July holiday is a liberal term. It means, oh, look up at the pretty colored lights in the sky, but give no thought to the symbolism of those fireworks. They mean nothing. I'm an American. I'm as red, white, and blue as you're ever going to find. I live my life by the philosophy of Admiral Stephen Decatur, who said, "My country, may she ever be right, but right or wrong, my country." I do not buy into the philosophy of many of the global community. I hold nothing against those who do. In fact, I encourage those who believe in that concept to continue striving toward that goal, because someday we will be a global community. Someday. But not today. Today, we are a fractured world divided by stupid things like skin color, religion, and political ideology. When we can overcome those obstacles, I will support the globalist concept wholeheartedly. Humans as a species must come together as one if we are going to delay extinction. And yes, I did say delay. Extinction is inevitable. But that doesn't mean we have to hasten its arrival. We have an entire universe to explore and colonize still, and it would be an awful waste of our intelligence, whether divinely gifted or whether evolved, if we brought about our own extinction before we had the opportunity to learn all of the universe's secrets and mysteries. And one day, if we can ever find a way to coexist peacefully and free from oppression, we just might get that chance. But until that day comes, I will champion the last refuge of freedom in the world, the United States of America. And if the day comes that all freedom is lost in this nation, I will champion freedom in general to my last breath. Until that day, I will honor those who sacrificed everything to bring about freedom in this country by celebrating Independence Day, not the 4th of July holiday. I will not refer to it as the 4th of July, except to refer to the actual date. I mean, we don't celebrate the December 25th holiday, do we? We celebrate Christmas. We don't celebrate the 4th Thursday in November holiday. It's Thanksgiving Day. It's not the January 1st holiday. It's New Year's Day. If we refer to our other holidays by their name, why is it that we find it acceptable to demote Independence Day to merely the 4th of July? Well, I'll tell you why. because the concept of national pride is considered by liberal leftists to be in opposition to their one-world government plans. They need Americans to give up their national identity in order to facilitate their plans. Americans are world famous for their jealously guarding of their national identity and their freedoms. The leftist enemies of this country work tirelessly to change that perception in the world. And they cannot succeed in this goal, however, unless they can convince the American people to change that perception of themselves. So, they willfully and with malice choose to dishonor our revolutionary heroes and proclaim Independence Day to be only the 4th of July holiday. It is merely to be considered a birthday party rather than a celebration of our victory over tyranny, and a way to pay homage to those who fought and died to ensure that victory. As long as I am alive, I will always declare the 4th day in July to be the American Independence Day, and I hope you will join me in doing so. All right, moving on from that rant. Apparently, there is a push to send Washington a very much needed message about gun control and the general behavior of elected officials. Now, those organizing the event are calling on people to march on Washington, D.C. armed with loaded weapons. This is an effort to warn the politicians of who exactly is actually in control of this country and send the message that confiscation of firearms will not be a very wise undertaking. By demonstrating the sheer firepower available to the general public, it is hoped that the politicians on Capitol Hill will get the message that we are mad as hell and we are not going to take their bullshit any longer. Hopefully they will get the message and stop passing unconstitutional laws, taking bribes, or exempting themselves from prosecution for criminal behavior. Now, it is hoped by the various organizers to achieve a minimum critical mass of about 10,000 participants before they attempt to request permission to exercise their inalienable and constitutionally protected right to peaceably assemble. Now, the event organizers are meeting a lot of resistance from the very people whom they are trying to attract. Now, let me make this very clear. This is a lose-lose proposition for everyone involved. No matter what happens, nobody can win with regard to this event. If the government denies the people the right to peaceably assemble simply because they will be carrying firearms, then they make their position on the First and Second Amendments very clear to the rest of the country. The political fallout from this denial would be catastrophic. Make no mistake about it, the current occupants of Capitol Hill are not the only ones who will lose in this scenario, and here's why. If they deny the application, thus making their contempt of the Bill of Rights known publicly, it is very likely that conservative incumbent politicians who support gun rights will lose their jobs after next year's midterm elections, when the entire House and 1/3 of the Senate is up for re-election. As a result of this, the liberal candidates are very likely to gain more seats in the Senate and House. If they manage to take control of the House, and if they maintain control of the Senate, this country will be lost before the next general election, assuming, of course, that there is one. If they allow the event to happen, they will be exposed as weak, and they will be forced to admit that the people are the rightful masters of this country. This is a situation that the liberals and their fellow cohorts, the communists, cannot allow to happen. Once their weakness is exposed, they will be hard-pressed to come up with any kind of spin that seemingly gives them the advantage. Now, to be sure, the president will certainly speak out against this demonstration. Of that there can be no doubt. It can also be assumed that the likes of Pelosi and Feinstein will also stand in opposition against those who are participating. Conversely, people like Rand Paul and a few other rising stars will stand, at least publicly, for the event. The result of exposing this political weakness for all the world to see will likely be presidential executive orders restricting gun rights further, continued illegal firearm confiscations, and potentially illegal raids on law-abiding citizens' homes for the purpose of searching for and seizing legally owned firearms. These warrantless searches and seizures will likely take place en masse and in the middle of the night so as to maximize confusion and compliance. Resistors will be arrested, disappeared, suicided, or outright murdered. Women and children will become collateral damage, to use the governmental vernacular. Now, this assumes that the event actually happens and is a peaceful event with no firearms-related arrests, injuries, or death. Which brings up the next point. If you don't believe that the government will have hundreds, if not thousands, of infiltrators at the event, you're a fool. Every agency under the control of the Department of Homeland Security will have operatives moving about the crowd, accidentally bumping into you in a covert frisking move, and instigating violence. If there are 10,000 or more gun-toting activists at this event, and even a single shot is fired, the result will be a bloody mess of dead patriots and government agents. And nobody wants this to happen. But you can be sure that if this is even permitted to happen, there will be agents there trying to turn it violent. Now let us assume that there will be no agents there fomenting violence. What is the likelihood of there not being some radicalized idiot there who will use the event as a means to create carnage? I mean, seriously, all it will take is one idiot from, say, the state of racism, also known as Idaho, to turn this event into a disaster. And yes, I'm deliberately picking on the state of Idaho. I guess I could have just as easily said New Jersey. Both of those states are very well known for their racial intolerance and violence towards those who are some color other than paste white. In fact, I was surprised the last time I went through Idaho that I didn't see any flags and banners with Nazi swastikas flying on them. They are so overtly racist. Anyway, what do you think will be the result of any sort of violence? What do you think will be the result of any sort of arrests? And you can be 100% certain that there will be arrests. They will trump up the charges if they have to, but people will be arrested, found guilty, then charged and given a mock trial so as to give the illusion of due process. But what do you think will be the outcome of even a single arrest of any person who happens to be within a mile of that protest, even if they're not involved with it? The outcome will be an overtly slanderous media propaganda campaign, presidential executive orders, and gun confiscation raids in the middle of the night. Given the level of corruption our government has degenerated into, I'm certain of this. So, if you plan to attend this event, I have one thing to say to you. Have your affairs in order before you go. That's right, be prepared to be arrested on trumped-up charges, or even worse, be prepared to give your life for the cause, because it is very likely that if this event turns south, that will be the end result for many people. I personally think this event is a bad idea, but a necessary one that is long overdue. It is time that the people draw a line in the sand and inform those who would usurp power that it is time to surrender to the will of the people. It is time for the people of this nation to take responsibility for their country and stop being cowards. We, the people, are the rightful masters of this great land, and it is time to put the servants back in their place. It is time to remind them of their servitude to the people and force them to recognize the supremacy of the rightful rulers and heirs to power as outlined and defined in the Constitution. Alright, enough on that subject. Let's move on to something else, like self-reliance and preparedness. Now, it gives me no pleasure to admit that the United States is a nation in collapse. Our country is failing. We see the signs of it all around us. Those of us who are awake to these facts know that the days of the United States of America are numbered. While a sad fact, believe it or not, it's okay. All nations eventually fail. All empires eventually collapse or fade away. History is replete with hundreds of examples of this eventuality. Nothing is permanent. As a wise person once said, all nations are merely a transition from the nation that was to the nation that will be. Now, while I would personally love to see this country continue to thrive under the rule of our constitutional laws, the fact is, future historians will record the United States of America as a once powerful nation founded on solid principles, corrupted by greed and corporatism before it had the opportunity to actually do the world any real good. Our sole claim to fame as a world power will be the defeat of Germany and Japan in World War II. Since then, the United States has done nothing to make the world a better place. We have engaged in war upon war, each having no clear defined goal. Those we have lost, we've blamed on the brave warriors who sacrificed everything they had to accomplish nothing more than to make wealthy people even wealthier and powerful people even more powerful. Can you say Rothschild? Those we won were a victory on paper only, having achieved absolutely nothing but making wealthy people more wealthy and powerful people more powerful. Again, can you say Rothschild? The people of the country have become dependents rather than heads of household. Where we once ruled the country and the politicals were servants, through skillful manipulation, the servants have become the masters and the masters dependent upon their goodwill to survive. Instant gratification, drugs to alter our emotional states into more compliant ones, and toys that keep us distracted have all led to the state of corporate dependency lifestyles to which we have become accustomed. And as a result, we are completely unprepared for any sort of disaster. We have only to look at Katrina and Sandy as proof to this concept. Americans have become so removed from the processes that bring about our lifestyle that they no longer even think about it until they are denied it. Even those directly involved in the process have been reduced to merely cogs in the machinery. Farmers grow and gather the foods we need to survive, and that's the end of their involvement in the process. No longer are they involved in the distribution of the food to the people who need it. Rather, someone in a big truck comes and takes the food from them to a warehouse where the food is divided up and put into other trucks. Those trucks then take the food to a factory where all the nutrients are processed out of the food to make it easier to package. Chemicals are then added to the processed foods to give them more appealing colors and more appealing flavors. Those are then taken to yet another warehouse to be distributed to stores for sale to the public. By the time fresh food has reached the home of the end consumer, it is only days away from spoiling to the point of worthlessness. If not consumed in a timely manner, it is then thrown away and becomes part of the next cog in the machine, waste management. Foods that are processed to the point of nutritional unviability can last for weeks or months at a time, but they poison our bodies with the chemical preservatives and dyes and flavorings that are added to them. If we want foods without these chemicals, we have to be prepared to spend as much as 3 times as much or more on them than the mass-produced, genetically modified, nutritionally negative food that we can obtain from our large warehouse chain stores. To make things even worse, if that's possible, after disasters like Katrina and Sandy, the dependents who have survived continue on with their lives as before, not having learned a damn thing. Rather than prepare themselves for the inevitable repeat of Mother Nature, they return their heads to the sand and behave as if the next time it will be different. They expect that if, and notice I said not when, but if, it happens again, the government and or charity organizations will provide for their outstretched and unproductive hands. Those who do try to take matters into their own hands are ridiculed and scorned by their friends and even their own families. Society views them as radicals and outcasts to be mistrusted and ostracized. Laws are enacted to prevent these self-motivated and thinking people from conducting their life-saving choices. People are encouraged to notify the authorities. I call it snitching, tattletaling, ratting out. Anyway, people are encouraged to notify the authorities on their neighbors if they see such harmful and radical activities, so that they can be scrutinized and harassed constantly by people who have nothing better to do than find things wrong with how they live their lives. People are oftentimes even criminalized by the system for conducting these activities. So what has been the result? What is the end result of society's derision of those who practice a self-reliant lifestyle? They have been forced to go underground, find creative ways around the laws. Some people have taken it upon themselves to create small pockets of freedom by creating what is referred to as liberty villages. Some refer to these communities as eco-villages, off-grid communities, or some other expression of independent and self-sufficient living. Now, I've discussed these villages in previous episode, and I will be discussing them again in the future episodes. But the point I want to get across here is that the people who develop these communities have come to understand that the way we live right now is not sustainable and doomed to failure. That failure may not come tomorrow, and it may not come the next day, but it will come unless things radically change in this country. Well, I'm here to tell you that these people are the ones bringing about that radical change, and they need to be embraced. They are showing that micro-communities can develop a lifestyle of self-sufficiency, self-reliance, and freedom, and do it all in harmony with nature. Guerrilla gardening, eco-friendly land management, resource development, and replenishment, and free energy generation are just some of the concepts that most of these types of villages have in common. Now, I could go on and on for days about the advantages of this style of living, but unfortunately, I only have a few minutes left in this podcast, so I must move on. The people of this nation are, for whatever reason, smitten with European lifestyles. Americans love the cosmopolitan perception they have been sold about how Europeans live without ever asking themselves the question, if they have it so great over there, why do they all seem to want to come over here? And that's a good question, and one that will be explored in a future podcast. For today, though, I want to inform you of the realities of European living. Maybe it will inspire some of you who haven't quite gotten the concept of preparedness to engage in that practice, especially if you really love the idea of European living. You will find in almost every European household some form of gardening. I know this to be a fact. I have been to Europe several times. I know they do this. Even in the most densely populated urban areas, Europeans grow at least some of their food. They use any available space to do so. Rooftops, window planters, spare rooms in their homes, even vertical gardening on their apartment patios. It is a way of life for them. It's considered to be a normal part of living. Grow some of your own food. What a radical thought. It saves money, and you know beyond doubt that you are getting at least some of the nutrition your body needs that you can't get from processed store-bought food. The concept of the farmer's market is commonplace to Europeans. It is so much a part of their social fabric that if their governments even considered outlawing them, as they have done here in America, there would be mass rioting in the streets. Political leaders would be jailed or dragged into the streets and beaten to death. Such is the importance to Europeans of maintaining a healthy lifestyle, something we in America seem to have forgotten in the name of convenience and instant gratification. Companies like Monsanto and others have managed to make it illegal to conduct farmers markets in some states. They've made it illegal to use anything but their products for food production. They've made it illegal to purchase anything other than their mass-produced, nutritionally deficient foodstuffs. All the while, Americans have stood by and watched, saying things like, "It's all in the name of progress," as they have been programmed to do by their television sets. Meanwhile, new food allergies and GI tract maladies keep developing, and nobody seems to know why. Or rather, they do know why, but they won't inform the people, because the result would be that their genetically modified organisms would be made illegal. Crop failures are blamed on everything other than their genetically modified insects that will only pollinate their genetically modified crops. Dying organic bee populations are being blamed on everything from environmental changes to the encroachment of the Africanized honeybee. However, their deaths are not being blamed on the real problem: their genetically modified crops that are designed to kill all bees other than their own genetically modified bees. There's a saying that one of my favorite characters from Star Trek, Mr. Spock, often says: "Chance favors the prepared." The day is coming that our society collapses. I don't pretend to know when that will happen. I have my own beliefs and my own opinions on that matter, but the fact is nobody knows when it will happen. However, I do know it is inevitable. Therefore, it is incumbent upon all Americans to do whatever they can to prepare themselves for this inevitability. My final comments for you regard the ending of this show. As you know, I always end my shows with a rendition of the Star-Spangled Banner by some artist. I have been informed by certain legal entities that my use of the Star-Spangled Banner at the end of each of my shows constitutes copyright infringement against some various artists who have been performing the songs. Therefore, I can no longer use my favorite ending theme because it might make some uppity celebrity or their heirs unhappy that they don't get their bloody 25 cents from me. Therefore, until I can develop a library of royalty-free versions of the Star-Spangled Banner, I will have to end the show with some other song. Today, I will end it with a tune called Conspiracy, which I think is appropriate. I am asking any listener out there who is musically inclined to help me out here. If you enjoy my show and would like to support it, please record for me your royalty-free version of the Star-Spangled Banner for the use at the end of my podcasts. This will allow me to maintain consistency in the platform I've developed for this show without having to pay some rich liberal performer for their rendition of America's national anthem. I thank you very much. I'm Robert Rowe, and thank you for listening. If you have any questions or comments about today's episode, please feel free to email me at rrowe@awarenessact.com. That's RROWE at awarenessact.com. You can also leave me a comment on my Awareness Act page or the the Awake Radio page located on Awareness Act. Please remember also to visit the websites of our friends, preppingblog.com and the Transegoist Daily Journal. And as always, I hope you have a great day.